why is ZK the best solution for privacy and scalability?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. The privacy side is really easy to answer because it's basically the only way that we can effectively provide privacy. And so there it's sort of like there's no competition. On the scalability side, it's really, really nice because it allows us to provide proof that a ton of transactions or a ton of computation is valid, that it was executed correctly. And so obviously we have things like rollups, which I assume people have heard of. And the basic premise is that we can take a ton of transactions that we could never fit on the Ethereum main chain, and we can execute them off chain, and we can generate a proof that all of those transactions are valid. And that proof basically constrains the operator of that rollup into only behaving honestly and only accepting valid transactions. And so this is like a really, really powerful thing because the alternative to zero knowledge proofs are optimistic rollups, where we have this game theoretic mechanism that where if there's an invalid transaction, someone can detect it and they can provide a fraud proof. And then there's a dispute resolution game and it works and it provides security, but it's not as good because it enforces this challenge period where you can't withdraw funds via the native bridge from an optimistic rollup for 7 days. And so if you look at what this forces on users of optimistic rollups, they have to use third-party bridges to withdraw their funds quickly. And so in aggregate, like tens of millions of dollars have been spent on third-party bridges. Like liquidity providers have to accept duration risk where they're locking up highly volatile assets for 7 days. And so for a single chain, the optimistic setting is not great. For a multi-chain setting, which we'll get to later in the show, we have like a ton of different chains and we're horizontally scaling to meet like internet scale demand for crypto in the space. It's actually really bad because with zero knowledge proofs, we can move assets securely and trustlessly between those chains as soon as we generate a proof. But for optimistic rollups, we need to preserve that fraud proof window for every single cross-chain interaction. And so users will never accept waiting 7 days to transfer their funds from one chain to another. And so if you think about like the full vision of what we're trying to build, which is an internet scale crypto ecosystem, like we believe that ZK is the only way to do that.
Okay. Yeah. And it makes total sense. So before we jump into the various elements of Polygon and the two main elements that you've announced and launched recently, and I just want to give an overview because Polygon is quite a broad ecosystem. We've just talked about the fact that there's 3 ZK teams. That alone is somewhat confusing to understand, let alone all the other pieces of tech within the ecosystem. Can you give us sort of a broad overview and then we'll dive into some of them?
Yeah, so I think that one thing you can say about Polygon is like we haven't always been good at providing like a focused and easily digestible story about what we're building. And I think that we're getting a lot better at that. And so the way that you should think about Polygon is it's this multi-chain ecosystem that's built on Ethereum. And each of those chains is powered by what's called the Polygon CDK. That's the Polygon Chain Development Kit. And so we have existing chains that are run by Polygon. So these are the Polygon POS chain, which is a side chain that has a ton of activity, a ton of TVL. We have the Polygon ZK VM, which is an EVM equivalent ZK environment that's an L2. And in the future, we'll have like Polygon Mident chains. But CDK is sort of the building block for this ecosystem. It's what allows anyone to spin up a new chain in the Polygon ecosystem. And so with this universe of chains, we have what's called the AG layer, which is the infrastructure that allows you to sort of stitch together these chains into what will feel to a user like using a single chain. So it's what creates this environment of unified liquidity and state and users that we think is kind of the final answer to crypto scaling.